Welcome. Today we're going to be getting into modifying out a Google slide presentation. Rather than choosing out a template, we're going to understand how to customize a presentation. To begin with, we're going to go over to Google Slides, clicking on the blank presentation on the top left side. When you first go into this, it provides you a number of different templates. The problem is that too often people will use these templates and they're just overused. They're not unique, and we're looking to customize something that can be a little bit more original. So today we're going to go with part one of breaking down and modifying out a Google slide presentation. First, I'm going to enter in GS Overview as our title. And you can label it whatever you'd like for the subtitle. For myself, I'm just going to eliminate the subtitle for this section. Then we're going to look to create out a new slide. Oftentimes, you can right-click to create out a new slide, or if you want to go to the top navigation on the left side, there are a number of different options that you can choose from. The plus sign automatically provides us the title and body text and slide, but you may consider having a blank slide or a caption, a main point, or a section header, just to divide up and separate from the original design. But today we're just going to stay with the title and body. When I click on this, we see the title and body, and I'm just going to put in test title. And I'm going to look to grab some generic type just to fill in this area. Doesn't need to actually have any message, but for today we're just going to maintain just a standard text to make it appear as if we do have type, and see how it gets modified as we get into customizing this. So again, we do not need the theme, so we're going to exit out over on the right side. But this simple light template is very boring, very dull, and maintains a lot of default settings that we want to get into customizing. Often, many people think that you just highlight over type of a title, and we can get into modifying out on choosing out a different font and modifying in that way. But if you want to maintain consistency from slide to slide, showing that you have an understanding of maintaining a theme throughout, it's better to get into managing your theme overall. So what we're going to look to do is actually go up to slide at the top navigation. And I'm going to look to click on edit theme. So slide top navigation. I'm going to click on edit theme, and we get what is known or what is seen as our theme and the different layouts that come with this theme. If I want to be a little bit more unique with this modification, understand that the theme page will affect all the slides that are attached to it. If you want to customize individual slides, you would want to go into the layouts and modify those elements. So if I want to modify our main theme, I'm going to look to select out my title. I'm going to click on the drop down, choose out a font that I could use for a title of a slide. Usually you want something that's a little bit more bold, draws more attention, is going to be separate from a standard generic text. So we're first going to look to switch that over. I'll pick out the Alpha Slab 1, and we can see that when I do click on this, you may notice that all the other slides, the layouts underneath, have all been modified to have this title format on each of their slides. We would also want to do the same idea for our settings. If I want to modify the body type, if I do want to select out the different levels inside our body type, if I select on one, I can't just simply click and drag over top of one to select all of them. But if I hold down Shift on my keyboard, I can click on the first one, click on the last, then select out all of them in between. So if I want to modify out my type, right now our standard default text is Arial. For this Arial type, I'm going to get something a little bit more presentable, something that's a little bit more unique. One of the popular fonts to consider is Montserrat. And I'm going to pick out just a normal setting so that we can see what it looks like. Showing a little bit of difference so it's not just the generic type. And again, you'll see that it does edit on every other slide as well. And it just, again, helps to create this consistency throughout your work. Otherwise, we want to get into modifying out the rest of the slide to create more interest so it's more dynamic. If I wanted to go with simple methods, I could first look at adding in, say, a shape to add in a bottom third. Down on the bottom of this page, I may not necessarily want to be providing it or putting it on my theme, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But I'm going to go to the top navigation, click on the shapes icon, little circle square, and then click on our rectangle. With the rectangle, I'm going to look to draw out a bottom third, just a bar that goes at the bottom to create some interest. To break up all of this white and add in maybe some color or just another design aspect. If I do change this color out, when I do change it, you can see that all these slides will be affected as well. So if I were to pick out a bright red, we can see that every single slide now has that same exact setting. And that may not necessarily be what you're looking to create. So just please understand that if you wanted to get into customization, I would want to separate and not place this bottom third on the main theme page, but I may want to choose out individual slides that have this effect or this design on it. So maybe I want to have it on anything that has the different levels of body type, or if I want to break it down and have it on certain features. But maybe I want to do something else for our title slide. For our title slide, we could look to draw more attention, more interest. Again, I could go into the shapes tool. Maybe it's doing something again with the rectangle, or maybe I want to try something that uses a triangle. The triangle shape, it was just to throw again a more dynamic angle on this. I'll change out the color. And usually you want to maintain consistency in the color scheme. So maintaining consistency of the red would be imperative to make sure that we're overall making it one cohesive design. For other slides, I can consider modifying out other aspects. Maybe instead of having this gray background over on the right here, I could change this out to the red as well. But just be careful, understanding that if I do make this background red, this type is now dark and more difficult to read. So I may want to knock out this type to appear a lot easier on the eyes. So I go over to my type color, choose out white, so it's more visible and easy to see. But you can see that we're starting to build out different elements to change up each of these slides while still maintaining a color scheme and something unique to the design. I can look to use the same shape or modify the shape into a different way. So if I have this triangle, I could rotate it and flip it horizontally, and then look to extend this up. So it's just breaking the design in a different way. So as I start to look through my left navigation, I can see that each of these slides are becoming a little bit more unique, a little bit more customized. You can always also add a new layer style. If you're looking to create a new layout, I can just simply right click on a layer or a slide and hit new layout, and it will be added onto the design options. So when I go into my settings, if I want to bring this element in, we'll do just a half page. Now when I take a look at my different layout, different design, if I go into the main page, I can see that it's now been added to my custom layout for this design concept. But going back into our edit theme, I'm going to click back on slide, edit theme. You may decide that you want something a little bit different. If instead I don't want to necessarily maintain this red color scheme, I could look to possibly put in a pattern. I could look to put in other elements. If I wanted to incorporate something external, maybe I want to put a background image behind this, I go up to Insert Image and Upload from Computer. I've already have a download or image that I want to bring in. It just brings in this nice decorative pattern that can be filling in the background. Understand again that this is going to fill in every single slide, so it really does change up your composition. What you have to be careful of is that you have your type or your information modified. That means that we have to change out the stroke or the color of the font so that it presents better. So now if I take a look at other slides, we can see how it's going to present with this background image. If you feel like this is too much or takes away from the design or it just becomes a little bit overwhelming, I can look to undo, and instead of using that pattern as one background, I can look to replace out this red standard shape with this object selected. I could go up to Insert Image, but realistically we want to get into modifying out the shape. So you may want to consider experimenting with gradients as well. If I don't like the shape, or if I want to modify the color, I don't like it flat, I can take a look at my top navigation. Rather than choosing out from just a solid color, I may want to consider getting into using gradients. Gradients give a little bit more interest, so it's not just a flat color. The standard default gradients that are options here give you either linear variations or radial gradations. Radial is just radiating from the middle out, and then linear is top to bottom as in the previews. But you can get also into customizing if you don't like the color schemes that they have to offer for you. So if I click on the paint bucket, I can click on the plus sign, add a custom color. I can see a sample of what my gradient currently is, but we can get into modifying out the linear to radial or changing the placement of that gradient traveling. Or on the bottom of our custom gradient pop-up, we can select out a color to change that color out. Right now I have the light teal color. I'm going to click on the drop down and I can pick out a sample from the bottom bar, or I can click on the plus sign to add in a custom color or sample from another document. So if I wanted to pick out a sample of some red, or even sample just from the button OK itself, if I click on this option, hit the plus sign, highlighting over top of this allows me to pick out a specific color as I want. So I can even go into my tools outside of the actual object to pick out a new different color. I click on that, we see how it's going to radiate. Within this setting, we have these two color stops. These two color stops cannot be moved. So just please understand that if you wanted to modify this, you actually have to add in color stops and change out the color scheme to your preference. So if I wanted to bring in the outside color to the middle, I can color sample it, but now I would have to change the outside color and pick out, say, a new color. And we're getting this transition from this pink to green back to pink again. If I wanted to remove out a color stop, you can't remove the outsides, but you can remove the inside. Or if I want to switch out this color, again, just clicking into the eyedropper to match the color as you're looking for. But if I want to remove out this color stop, just hit remove with it selected and it deletes that out. So now that I have this pink to greenish blue color, I click OK, and we see that it's applying onto the shape that I had selected. So just understand that I can go back into any of these shapes, go back up to my paint bucket, click on my gradient, and then apply that same gradient onto any of my features. It really depends on your color scheme, your preference, and what you're trying to create. But it can be customized very easily as long as you understand the different tools. So if I wanted to do a rainbow gradient, I go to the gradient tool, pick out the gradient that I'm looking for, and again, I'm going to eliminate out the stroke because it's more of a distraction. But if I want to modify this, I go into my gradient and I'm going to add in a few color stops. This just helps to break up the color scheme, and I can now look to change out any of the color stops selected to pick out a new color. So if I start with red, go yellow, we'll go to more standard green, over to purple, and now we have more of a rainbow effect. When I click OK, we see it apply onto the shape. If you're not satisfied with that shape, you would have to go back into customizing this gradient, and I can change the angle to be more on a vertical and see how I can apply it across the bar instead. But it's all your preference of what you want to create. So if I want to go back to a gradient, I absolutely can. But once we have these settings now modified, if I want to change these out, again, I can select on the slide that I want to modify. And I can see, again, this is going to maintain to any of the slides that I originally created out. When it comes into the visual images and adding in images to modify, we want to understand that you can try different methods to make your images stand out. If I have a paragraph of information and I want to place an image off to the side, I'm going to look to bring in an image of just a headshot. So I can go up to insert image, or I can go onto the little insert image icon, upload from computer, and I'm going to pick out just a headshot. For this picture, the pink background doesn't necessarily work for my design, doesn't really match well. So you have to think about how it can be used into properly displaying out what you're trying to get across. For this image, rather than just leaving it as the rectangle as it originally started with, I can consider cropping it down. The crop tool is at the top navigation. If I click on the crop tool, you see this little black bounding box. And I can look to click and drag the bounding box in to focus on our subject, or I can move inside of the circle to center out my subject as well. This gives me a little bit more space, and now I can modify my text box to fit the overall area better. This looks nice, but you can consider thinking about how you can modify the shape of the object as well. Just leaving it on a standard circle may not be the best solution. So if I wanted to create out another variation, I'm going to duplicate this out so we can see it. With this duplicate slide, rather than leaving it as a circle or as a square, we're going to turn it into a circle, or we're going to take a look at different shapes. First, we want to select on the square image. I'm going to go up to the arrow next to our crop tool, and this is the image mask or mask image. When I click on the drop down, there are a number of shapes that you can pick out from. If I wanted to pick out something weird and crazy, I could try to see what the shape would look like if we want to put customized shapes. If I want to experiment with a 3D object, I can see what the 3D object looks like. But any shape that you choose, you'll see a variation to present that image. Doesn't mean all of them are good, but you have the ability to choose something that is unique for your design. For today, I'm just going to pick out a standard circle, and understand that this is an oval shape. You will likely have to modify the size a little bit to be more circular and more balanced all around. But this circle now presents a little bit stronger than the original concept of just the square. And you can bring this accent, this element of a circle, into other elements of your design. But you also may want to consider something entirely different. If I wanted to get into modifying out this bottom third or adding in more elegance to my design, again, we took a look earlier about how to add in a pattern. I'm going to go back into my slide edit theme. Understand that if you do have an external image, you can replace images, but not inside of this section. Inside the edit and theme, I would want to look to bring in a bottom third bar. So I'm going to go back up to Insert, going back up to Insert, I'm going to go up to Image, Upload from Computer, and again choose out that black pattern. With that black pattern selected out, I'm going to look to scale this down so it fits as my new bottom third. When scaling, we want to understand that I do not want to simply just click on the object and click and drag. That's going to squeeze down the shape. We don't want to distort the shape out, but rather we're going to either hit the crop tool and click and drag from the black line downward. I can look to have this run along the bottom third of my page. So now when I take a look back at my original slides, this might be a little bit more unique or something customized for your design aspect. But getting into the layout, getting into this information and presenting it, you may not like having your image being so separate from the text and what's going on. So instead, I'm going to, again, duplicate out this slide. And we're going to look to eliminate out this image. But we're going to take advantage of the tools that we have for graphic design. So we're going to go into Photoshop. With Photoshop, we're going to go to that same image. And we're going to look to remove out this pink background. It's become more of a distraction than helping us. And I'm going to hit Remove Background to cut out the unnecessary area. What I would recommend, though, is that you crop down this area as well. We don't need to have negative space that is not helping the design or just takes up too much space. So I can hit Enter to cut it out and crop it down. Then we're going to save this as a transparent PNG. So I can click on the drop down, change over to PNG. Now that I have that saved, I can go back over to my design. And this time we're going to insert our image. We have our headshot sitting with a transparent background. And this now makes it a lot more unique in how it's customized to our presentation. The subject is now cut out, so there's a better balance between the subject and the text. And they work together more cohesively as likely a reference of identifying who this person is or what they're trying to sell, what they're trying to market. From these slides, we see the square shape to the circle into having that subject stand out on their own. You can even play with arrangement where it might overlap and sit over the bottom third and how it might tie in better to your design aspect. It's all a matter of figuring out what's going to be the best way to present the information and aesthetically draw the attention of the viewer. Our final aspect of today, we're going to create out a new blank slide. I go down to blank at the bottom. If I want to edit or add in an image in a unique fashion, I can consider getting into using a mask in Adobe Photoshop. We're going to go over to the boat image as provided, and we're going to create a new layer. With new layer, I'm going to go over to my paintbrush tool. And just so it's visible, I'm going to change out my fill color to white. But we're going to go up to Window at the top navigation and click on our brush settings. With our brush settings, I want something that is going to give me a more painterly type of brush. We can try different options to see how it's going to affect the stroke. But with our brush setting, I'm currently just maintaining a standard brush. If I do want to modify the brush in any way, I could adjust the angle. or scale it up to work a little bit larger, get things a little bit filled. But with our new brush selected out, on layer 1, I'm going to paint over top of the sunset and over top of the boat. I can make it a little bit more scattered by clicking around the outside edge, or paint in the thicker elements where I want. If I wanted to go back into my brush settings, I could look to rotate this again, changing up the angle so that I'm getting a different effect with my brush. But once I have this white area covering up my boat, covering up the sunset, I'm going to look to select out the area that we just painted in. So I'm going to go over to my layers panel, hold down Control or Command on my keyboard, and click on the thumbnail of that shape. When I do that, I see the little dotted lines appearing around the outside of the subject. With that, I'm going to now hide layer 1, and with the background layer, I'm going to select on that layer and add a layer mask. This will cut out all the unnecessary area around the outside of the image, presenting us with this more painterly style of having this boat with the sunset. Again, just as we did before, we can look to save this as a PNG. I can go save a copy, change out my type to PNG. Now I can go back over to my slides, and I'm going to look to place in this image, upload it from the computer, choose out my boat PNG, and likely if you have this subject with a sharp edge on that left side, you want it running off the edge. When presenting, you want to have a purpose of why you have certain things cut off or how they're designed out. So I can look to place out text or different information off to the right, just as we wouldn't put our subject floating on the top of this image. Having her floating, not touching the bottom edge of the thing, does not end up presenting well. So consider how it can be all tied in together to make something more unique, something elegant, and more presentable and professional in the design aspect. That is part 1 for modifying out a Google slide presentation. I'll see you again soon.